welcome to the 2+2 Pokercast presented by RunItOnce.com. I am your host, A. Schwartz, alongside producer Roscoe P. Coltrane.
Hello, boys and girls.
Not alongside Mr. Terrence Chan. Terrence has food poisoning and couldn't go today. So, I don't know, must have had too much kale or something. I'm not quite sure what happened there, but he will be joining us later in the week. We're going to do another episode of the Pokercast, get caught up on some In Case You Missed It and some other stuffs. But today we've got an interview, and I looked, Roscoe, at the November 9, and there's a whole bunch of guys there I think would make interesting interviews. But one of the guys, especially considering all that's gone on with William Kassouf and some different issues to talk about surrounding the coverage of the World Series on ESPN, is Kenny Hallaert. He sits fourth in chips from Belgium. He is a tournament director as well as a player. So I thought it would be really cool to bring him on and see if he could kind of take a step back. And I know it's going to be difficult for him, but if he can look at the coverage and see what's been shown on TV and maybe get his comments as well as some of the other issues around the World Series of Poker main event. So we're going to bring him in a minute. Cool. Thanks to Kenny for joining us. Yeah, it should be good fun.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the final table props for for the World Series that are coming up. If he wants to lay off some of his even out some of the variants, he can put 1K on Cliff Josephine at 3.5 to 1.
Okay.
And he's fourth. Obviously, I guess it's just listed by the amount of chips that you have. He's
sure.
He's 6.33 to 1.
6.33 to 1. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Wow. We'll ask him about that. Why don't we bring him in now? Kenny, welcome to the Pokercast.
Thank you.
Congrats, obviously, making the November 9. As a poker player you've played for a fair amount of time. I read 2004 you started. It's the dream of every poker player.
Yeah,
is that right?
Yeah, that's basically your ultimate goal. When I started playing poker back in 2004, the first things, when you look a little bit online for like YouTube movies about poker and stuff, you're coming across a lot of the WSOP footage, and like one of the first things that comes to your mind is like, wow, one day I wanna play like in a WSOP. That would already be a dream coming true, and that the dreams have been coming true throughout the last years. Already in 2008, I played my first main event, and I always played it since. And over time, you're like extending your dreams, and obviously, the main goal is to like once make it to the final table of the main event and eventually win it, of course. But we're not there yet. But we're quite short on. I would say short on winning it. I mean, still 9 more people to defeat, but I'm close to it. I mean, I'm probably will never come that close again in my life to winning it. So it's already a dream coming true, and maybe the ultimate dream in poker will come true and might become the world champion. But there's 8 other players still competing with me who have the same dream at the moment.
Well, you've got through 6,000. What's another 8 guys? I mean, it's not that big of a deal, right?
If you look at it that way, it doesn't. No.
It's interesting.
Those other 8 people are probably thinking the same. So
exact same thing.
As I see 1 in 9, it's still only like approximately 11% chance that I would give myself to win the whole thing. So it's not that big, but I've hit 2 others before, so there's always a chance.
It's right after the World Series of Poker, they do the main event. The November 9 has reached poker listings, poker news. They do interviews with people, video interviews, and it's funny. And I'm sure you've seen these too in the past because I know you have friends. We'll talk about that in a second who have made it. But it's always these people who they've been in intense competition for 7 days. They haven't slept much. They're like zombies sitting there trying to answer questions. And I always get a kick out of those interviews because I feel bad for the guys because most of them are just like, wow, what happened? It's like, you wake up and you're in a dreamland. And so it probably doesn't sink in real quick. But are you at the point now where you're okay? This is sunk in. I've got this goal ahead of me.
Yeah, I stayed in Vegas for like 1 more week in total after making it to the final table. And I really don't think it has sunk in completely than when I was in Vegas, because there's still a lot bit of the media attention and so much things going around. You're already starting to look to how to prepare and stuff. So it didn't really sink in. It was more than when I got home that I like realized, well, wow, I just did it. I couldn't believe it's actually that I did make it, because, like I said, it's a dream that comes true, but it's a dream which looks like impossible. Like every year you're trying to, I mean, you're starting the main event, but there's 6,700 players that have the same dream, and only 9 of them eventually make it to that final table. But in the end, there are 9 seats at the final table, so 9 people will make it, and I'm very happy, of course, that I'm one of those 9 players that eventually made it.
Well, and another interesting thing, Kenny, is it's impossible that we get any poker player will get to the final table, but you've had friends, get to the final table consistently year after year. Mikhail Brumelhaus, I saw your friends with Jort van Hoof and Pierre Neuville last year. So, I mean, it's pretty amazing that you're surrounded by these people who keep doing it.
It's really amazing indeed. Happen to know 3 people or 3 players quite good that make it in to the final table in consecutive years. It's quite amazing. And then I even was there at the final table during the last 2 years to support Jorrit and Pierre. I wasn't there when Mikhail was there, but I remember that time I was thinking about going there, but I had some other duties which unfortunately collided a little bit and preventing me from going there. But otherwise, I might have just been there for like 3 consecutive years, and I will be there at least this year as well, of course. So it's quite amazing, and even when it's always nice if you know some people that have success and make it to the final table, but there's always something deep inside of you that's, I wouldn't say it's jealousy, but
right,
like somewhere you're like, I want to be there as well.
Why can't it be me?
And I mean, it might as well be me sitting there. And obviously, I'm very happy that I made it there myself. But I would have been happy as well if another friend would have made it this year.
You mentioned you played the main event every year since 2008.
Correct,
$10,000 is a lot of money, and if you're not comfortable talking about it, I totally understand. But if you are, is there? Do you buy in? Do you play satellites? Do you sell off action? What's sort of the way that you go about playing the main event?
I always buy in myself. A recent beginning of my poker career, sometimes I sold like a small part of it, sometimes like 20% or something. But I swap a bunch. But if I would have only like a $10,000 bankroll and they say you can only play one more tournament, it would be without any doubt the main event. And I've said that for years already. It's not because I made it now to the final table that I'm saying that it's the one tournament that I don't want to miss every year. It's such a nice event, and I like playing it. And when I'm in Vegas, and I'm usually there for pretty much the whole series, I'm playing some satellites as well. Actually, this year I think I qualified. I won actually 2 or 3 satellites to the main event or something.
Oh, yeah.
But even if I would have bricked them, I still would have played them anyway, playing some sit and goes as well. And I pretty much like Vegas quite a lot, actually.
It sounds like you do pretty well there.
Yeah.
Last year, you first question I want to ask you, actually, when you talk about swaps, what's your approach to swaps? And I know it gets into, wow, that player wants to swap me. Awesome. He thinks, a lot of my game to do that before the tournament, or do you do, we're down to 100 players. There's a friend of mine over there. We're close in chips. Maybe we can swap something. Or do you do it both or strictly before or during?
I do it both. Even like for this year's main event, I have like decent big group of people where I usually swap with, so I swap with them, and then after running deep, there were at certain points in the tournament other players that I knew quite well who at the same points had approximately the same chip stack, so we swapped a little bit more. So If I win the whole event, I'm definitely not making myself happy, but make a bunch of people, other people, happy as well.
You're a tournament director also, we've learned, on the World Series of Poker coverage, and I want to talk more about that in a bit. But just first, with your tournament director hat on, and we're talking about swaps, this has come up in the poker community a lot lately with talking about the ethics of doing, bigger swaps, obviously, than 1 or 2%, where it impacts a big deal. But what's sort of your general opinion on swapping out percentages when you get down to, say, final tables and stuff like that?
Well, yeah, people do swap for various reasons, like to reduce the variance. Of course, it's like a big deal. But I mean, if you want, like, if people have big swaps in each other and they end up sitting at the same table or eventually the final table, or even if somebody who backs somebody else happens to sit at the same table, that guy can come from have sometimes very difficult decisions, because he's not inclined to. He definitely doesn't want to bust one of his horses, for example, or somebody that he has a big swap in. So honestly, if you want to make the whole poker, if you want to make it 100% safe, basically you should forbid people swapping and selling action to people that are also playing a tournament. But that's impossible. That would basically kill the whole poker economy. But if it's hard. I mean, like I say, you cannot completely forbid these kind of things, because they will happen anyway. But if people are at the final table and swap a big chunk with each other, for example, like 1/3 of their action, there might be situations occurring where they have a difficult decision, but because they don't want to bust the guy where they have a big piece of it as well. So it isn't 100% fair. I think if you want to play it at least a little bit fair, I think it should be open. And if you happen to be at the final table and somebody has a big piece of action for you, which from at least if two players are coming to the final table and they have a big piece of each other, I think they should be honest to the other players and just tell them that, say, like, look, we're good friends. We're always swapping, for example, 20% in every tournament we play. Okay, now we're sitting together at the final table. Then at least the other players know about it. Right.
Yeah, for sure. I want to ask you about your run this year. I watched the coverage, and when you think about going deep in the main event, and I believe last year you finished 123rd. Is that right, in the main event?
Last year I finished in 123rd, and it felt already as a very deep run. No?
Yeah.
Already you're still so far away from the final table.
Right.
I was eliminated somewhere halfway through day 5, and I kind of was disappointed when I was knocked out. Not only the fact because you're knocked out, but because I misplayed one hand a little bit. Where the kind of regret was with ace. I mean, where I three-betted ace king where it could have been actually a better spot to flat. Not a big mistake, but I kind of regretted a bit, and I felt like I screwed up a situation which could have been like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to go deep in the event. And then all of a sudden, this year I make it even further. So it's weird to make 2 deep runs on back-to-back years, but it's I can't complain on how I have been running in the main event the last 2 years.
Well, yeah, and it's not even just 2 deep runs; it's 3 deep runs, because you finished 5th in the Colossus with 23,000 players last year as well. So, these big, huge, giant field events, it's like, it's 3 of the last maybe 5 or 6 of these that you've played. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is indeed. Yeah, maybe I didn't play the Colossus this year actually.
Okay.
But yeah, my last 2 main events and the Colossus, and maybe I played a couple of the Monster Stack. There was big field events as well, or the little drop for 1 drop.
What is it about big fields, Kenny, that you do well, or is it
I don't know. It's I should look into my records, but I'm usually doing better in big fields than in smaller fields. It's obviously a bit of a big part is variance, of course, as well. But
sure,
I'm somebody that has a lot of patience, I would say.
It's you come off like that on television. You come off as a calm guy with a bunch of patience, and maybe that helps in these giant fields.
Yeah, I mean, I always play one hand at a time and just not. I mean, I don't want to be the chip leader at the end of day one of a big tournament because you don't win any prizes with that. So I just keep going and keep grinding, having a lot of patience until the good spots come up to accumulate some chips and if
run good and then run good
and then run good and then win your coin flips because you have to run good to go deep in an event anyway. Even in the main events where the structure is so good and so slow and where you can afford to be carded for sometimes a whole day. Yeah. Still, you need to run good. You have to avoid bad luck as well, and you have to win some of the important coin flips you're having. And like I say, in the main event last 2 years, I've had an amazing rush. The only had like a bad run like for half a day on day 5 last year, and then maybe like 2 hours this year on day 5 as well. But it's altogether 15 days of play, so. I really can't complain about how I've been running throughout these years.
Yeah,
and the Colossus itself, it's 20,000 people, 20,000 entries in that tournament, 23,000. So I probably think I won at least like 5 or I would say like 6 to 8 big coin flips to get to the final table. So it's sometimes you need to run good. That's what happens with me. So yeah.
Well, as a guy who watches the coverage, Kenny, it's interesting because when I thought about what I was going to ask you about, as far as some of the hands and different stuff that happened along the way, there really hasn't been a ton. You've just kind of accumulated chips. You haven't had one of these big hands where you suck out and hit a 2-outer or. Get it in aces against kings against queens. I mean, it's been this sort of slow progression for you. I tried to find a big hand, and there really wasn't any.
Yeah, I had one big hand on day 5 where I got a 3-way all-in which was on the ESPN broadcast as well, with kings versus ace 10 and queens, and that hand, well, an ace flop, but I made backdoor.
Oh, the running hearts hand. That's right.
Yeah, the running hearts hand. That was.
Forgot about that one.
Yeah, I think in big blinds, if looking into big blinds, the biggest pot that I played. Maybe I played quite some big pots in the first days as well. But there I always basically had the nuts when when money went in. I mean, it kind of had the nuts there as well, of course, with the kings. But those were. Yeah, where a majority of the chips went in post flop here, and that particular hand, it was maybe one of the most important of the whole tournament. Actually, the most important one was the one hand where I was all in and at risk, and it was also on day 5 with kings versus queens for 20 bigs each. And luckily that helped. That hand held up, and all of a sudden 2 hours later I was chip leader of the tournament. I really can't blame on how I've been running. And throughout the main event I always had it. If I had queens, they didn't have kings or even ace king. They just happened to have like jacks the whole time. So it was a tournament like that, and I never run into a set. Well, actually I ran into a set once, and I lost, I think, 3/4 of my stack where I flopped up pair as well. So
I see.
But luckily, I could survive, or I could recover from it. So
sure, I want to get your thoughts on one hand that I did see on the coverage. That was a hand against Veo. He opened, I think it was 100, 200,000. He opened with ace jack to 450. You defend in the big blind with the 6-3 of clubs. He's got about 45 bigs, and you've got him pretty well covered there. Is that a pretty standard defend for you there in that spot?
Well, anti-sport 30K as well. So there's like getting decent odds with suited hands, suited 2-gappers. So I mean, I wouldn't go too much looser probably on that spot, but I decided to defend there. I mean, quite standard, I would say. It's
okay. Flop. The flop
probably folding 6-3 off there, but. Yeah.
But more, okay. Yeah. Flop comes king jack 5 2 clubs. You flop the flush draw, and Gordon flops middle pair ace kicker, and the flop goes check check. The turn brings the 10 of hearts. It brings a backdoor heart draw. You bet 925, pretty big bet, 925 into 1.2. I wanted to ask you about that spot specifically with that flop, because that sort of flop texture and that turn especially as well, the 10 of hearts, When he checks behind on the flop, it seems like it's a lot of sort of pot control. I've got a hand with some showdown value because if he's got total air, he's gonna maybe bomb at that flop a lot of the time because it hits his range, right? So I was thinking
it hits my range as well, of course.
Yeah, it does. It does indeed. So the 10 rolls off, and you bet into him. And then he calls. He calls the 1.2 on the turn. River bings 3 hearts, brings a backdoor flush, and you bet 1.6, about half pot into 3.1, and he folds. What are your thoughts on how he played the hand? I wanted to get your opinion on him folding the river after calling the turn and then checking the flop. What did you think of his play there?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, he had the ace of hearts as well.
Yeah.
He had like a nut blocker there. Given my it looks. If he calls a lot of my hands, he's losing too. But he could have had the best hand to bluff with because he had the ace of hearts. Right. Eventually, he didn't do it. Actually, I spoke to him a bit as well about the hand. And he said that he thought about raising it, but eventually he folded without ever considering to calling it. I'm indeed betting big on the turn to try to represent at least that I have a big hand as well, and hoping already that let him fold, for example, like a lower pocket pair he might have, or some hand like an A6 hand that he's willing to fold there on the turn, or even hands like a 10x, or like if he had like a jack-x as well. Maybe he's not folding into turn bet, but he might fold it to the river bet. And since the backdoor flush came, I thought it was a good card for me to continue to barrel because I might have made backdoor flush as well.
Sure.
So I continued to barrel, and luckily for me, he folded that hand.
Want to take a quick minute just to thank our sponsor, Sharkscope.com. Are you using tracking software while playing online poker? If the answer is no, you really need to look at starting because many of your opponents are using site-sanctioned software to see in-depth information about you as you're playing them in real time. Now it's time for you to even the playing field, announcing the Sharkscope Desktop, the only stat tracker that shows both hand history-based statistics and all the Sharkscope stats combined into one heads-up display incorporated right over the online poker table you're playing. This invaluable tool is available to buy in a standalone version, or you get it free with a gold or silver subscription at Sharkscope. Find out all the details at Sharkscope.com. Sharkscope.com, the best for over 10 years. Track your statistics, avoid the sharks, and find easier tournaments at Sharkscope.com. I also read an interview with you where you talked about when you first came over to Vegas and North America, playing in some of the tournaments, that it took you a while to adjust to playing against American players, having played in Europe, for most of your career. This one sort of jumps out at me, but maybe this is against an American player in Gordon Vayo, and I wanted to get your opinion on how different North American players are to Europe, and what did you do to adjust to the different style of play?
I would say in Europe that it's way more aggressive pre-flop to start with. People are lots more three betting going on, and it's a little bit more passive in America. I would say people are tending to call down sometimes a little bit too loose as well. So you should bluff a little bit less as well. So I needed some adaptations in the beginning to my game. It's after a while you get the experience of playing against them and with talking to other friends about the general style of play. You're adapting your game, and I've been to the World Series every year since 2008. So I've played a decent amount of tournaments in the US, and I would say it's almost 50-50 between tournaments I played in the US and the tournaments I played in Europe. So I'm kind of well adapted to the game at this point. So I know already where to make my adjustments when playing in America.
Gotcha. Okay, so I want to ask you about some of the issues that have been going on around the coverage. William Kassouf, of course, being the big one. But before we get to him, I wanted to ask you about the situation that came up. You were on the feature table. The guy beside you pulls out a couple of sheets of paper, and they're push-fold charts. I think the guy had like 20 big blinds or something.
Yeah, it was the start of day 6. Well, no, the guy had actually a decent amount of chips. I thought he had...
Did he?
Like 35 bigs or something.
Did he? So he doesn't need the push-fold charts, really?
He actually didn't need them. But yeah, when we were unbagging the chips, I was looking at his chart, and I kind of joked about him. I said, you did your homework before coming to here. And he's like, yeah. And then all of a sudden, play begins, and he looks at his cards, and then he's looking at his charts. I'm like, dude, I mean, let's keep the game at least honest. And yeah, thinking... Yeah.
Well, it was funny that he was arguing with you. He was like,
I convinced that he could use it because it wasn't an electronic device or something.
Right.
But obviously, there's information there on how you should play. I mean, it doesn't make any. Yeah, I mean, it's not fair to the other players to have an advantage and saying which hand you should play and which hand you shouldn't play. Of course, in between hands, you can look on your phone or look at your papers to see how you want to play next hand, but you cannot give players the advantage of first looking at their cards and then browsing towards some charts to see which hands they should be playing or they shouldn't be playing.
It was pretty funny. He pulls the charts out. He picks up ace queen and min raises or something. I'm like, why did you?
Because he still was quite deep. He had at least 30. I think it was around 35 big blinds. So actually, he's lucky his hand hadn't been killed because it's definitely possible that it's. I mean, the thing as a TD myself in that specific situation, it could be a valid reason to kill somebody's hand because at that point he clearly broke the rules. So there's definitely a reason for it to kill his hand at that point before he even acted.
No, I agree. Okay, let's move on to the man who's been much of the topic of discussion around the television coverage this year, William Kassouf. First off, I want there was some stuff this week. Of course, it looked like the whole table was ganging up on him. But of course, we only see this sort of sliver of coverage. Obviously, there were some things that went on that we didn't see that really irritated a bunch of people. But I want to get your opinion first on when we first came across William with the Stacey Madison hand. I imagine you watched the coverage. And what did you think of Jack Effel's 2-round penalty there? Did you think that was fair? He called it for taunting. I'm not sure. When we think of taunting,
it's hard for me to give comments on. I wasn't there. I was obviously in the same room, but I wasn't there. And it's on TV, so it's edited. So maybe a lot of stuff might have been edited, which maybe some things have been said which were not on the TV coverage anyway. So it's hard for me to give a clear opinion about that the whole situation. So I cannot say if he was correct or if he wasn't correct, but
fair enough. No, I understand that. The comment for me is, when we think of taunting here in North America, we think of standing up in somebody's face and I got you, or yelling and screaming. William's approach, from what we've seen on the coverage, is all he's trying to be friends with everybody, to manipulate them to do what he wants them to do. There isn't a lot of negative stuff that he does, but. Okay, so let's get on to the time that you did spend with William.
Day 7 of the main,
Day 7 of the main. So, taking off your, player hat and putting on your TD hat, what's your sort of general, outlook on what he's doing at the table?
He's talking a lot. At the table, and he was trying to get into people's heads, but he was stalling a lot, basically, and that was the whole thing that irritated everybody at the final table. His time, nobody was really about his table. Nobody really cared about it because nobody was basically listening to it anyway, and it's as like Gordon Vio says, it's like a tape recorder going on and off again because he's repeating the same sentences the whole time. But nobody really cared about it. I think the players at the table were all quite experienced to not have been intimidated by it. the problem was his time taking the whole time. Like for every single decision, he took an extreme amount of time. When it was folded to him, he started talking before he started talking a bit and trying to look around before even looking at his cards. Mm-hmm. And then when he looked at his cards, then every single decision took at least like 15 seconds. And if he wanted to raise, it took sometimes like up to a minute. And even in post-flop situations, when it was checked to him, he as well would sometimes take 2 minutes of time to make a decision. So I mean, I can imagine sometimes pre-flop, even when it's fold you have the big decision. If you're short, for example, if you're sitting with a stack between 10 and 15 big blinds, you might want to think about it. Do I really want to raise or go all in with this hand? But that was totally not the case. He was, let's say at least 40, 50 big blinds deep, maybe even more. So it shouldn't be too hard of a decision if you decided to play the hand or not. And then he's replying, I think about much more than you do. But the thing is, we just think ahead, and we already know if it's fold to us, which hands are we going to play. For him, it just probably takes a little bit more time to come to the same conclusion as for us.
Because he hasn't looked at the cards, and that's, I guess, the frustrating part for all the players. And the interesting thing is, on the coverage this week, he had lots of big hands and lots of spots.
Well, they're obviously only showing the hands that were interesting.
Right, that's what I was
going to say. For us, it was every single hand that took that amount of time. Even the hands where he just had a grab hands.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't get ace king or a pocket pair every two hands. I mean, it just was the only thing we really saw was when he was short, he was playing quicker, and the moment he had some chips, the more chips he had, the slower he started playing. And unfortunately for us, he did have a lot of chips, and that was just annoying. And I think as a tournament director, you definitely can make a point out of it, and I wouldn't be ashamed to put somebody like on a 15-second clock for every single decision he has to take. And even if he has a hard decision, he created a situation for himself for only having a 15-second clock on him for every decision, because he's saying like we are the only players that he was the only player that was called the clock on him, but no of the other players took time. And even if there was another guy at the table who took sometimes maybe like a 2 or 3 minute time, he would give him the time, because that was probably because he probably had a reason for it, because he didn't do it in other hands, because he had a difficult decision. He didn't take a lot of time to make his other decision, but he was for every single decision taking an extreme amount of time, and that's
the problem, right? When he does that kind of stuff is when he does it with 7 deuce off, and he sits there and he looks around the table and he's talking, and then he takes 20 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever.
And you see it on the coverage of the previous days where he sometimes has like 8 high and somebody shoves on him and he's still asking for the count and still waiting 1 minute to make his decision. But every single hand was basically like that for us. And I mean, on day 7, we're playing for, indeed, we are playing for a lot of money, but we want to play hands, of course, and not just sitting there. And he just wanted to have his TV time, I think. I don't know. That's one of the main reasons for him.
It might have been
because as a player, I really don't mind having him at the table, because he has, basically, I think all apart from one pot I won versus him, and as a player, he's actually good to have at the table, but his behavior at the table sometimes goes a little bit too far.
Do you think he's good for the television coverage? We've seen this in the past. Guys like Jesse Sylvia, other players at the final table who are quiet but take their time. Zvi Stern, I believe, did as well. So, they're sitting there and they're thinking. The difference between those guys and William, of course, is he's talking nonstop during it. So it seems like he got a lot more sort of attention from the other players, negative attention from the floor staff, because he was talking and surrounding that. But it was actually the time taking that other people have done before as well.
In general, slow players are not good for TV coverage. I mean, if there's an edited, if it's recorded and showed afterwards, you still can edit the stuff. But if you're looking at a live poker tournament and people always take an extreme amount of time, that's not good for TV, because then you're as someone who occasionally watches poker, will find that very boring. On the other hand, talkative players can be good for the game, definitely. Like, for example, this year we had Alex Keating as well, a very talkative player. And those table players are definitely good to have in your TV coverage. And even Will can be good to have at your TV coverage because he brings some animation to the game. Mm-hmm. But you can talk and still play your hands at the regular pace. And he can try to get in somebody's head. That's definitely within his rights and within the rules, I would say. But you cannot slow down the game because that's against the good spirit of the game, basically.
What do you think about a shot clock? There's been a lot of talk in tournament poker about bringing in a shot clock. Is that something that you would like to see?
No, because I think that would help a lot of recreational players to play poker, and that's something we definitely don't need. I think it's more to the professional and the experienced players to be aware of it, that tanking is just not good for the game in general. I don't think shot clocks will be a solution for the future. It's just players themselves that needs to be aware of it.
And floormen too, right? Floormen tournament.
And the floormen too. They have to. I mean, if they see somebody stalling the whole time, they shouldn't be afraid of putting somebody on a shot clock themselves. Just that player alone, and even decreases his shot clock if he keeps pushing it to the limits and with his time.
Do you think Will got to any of the guys at the final table? Do you think he seems to think he put a bunch of people on tilt? They made some bad calls. Do you think that's true? I wasn't 100% convinced.
Yeah, on the last episodes they did show some hands where people maybe did not make a good call, among others me, with my 6-7 off, if I recall correctly.
Right.
But in general, no. I mean, he won a bunch of pots, but he lost a bunch of pots. Like everybody, chips were going around a bit. I wouldn't say that it puts players basically on tilt throughout that. We were, like I say, just more irritated about his time taking for all of the hands.
Okay, let's talk about the November 9th. It's coming up. We're 10 days away. You're flying to Vegas tomorrow, right? You're flying to Vegas?
I'm flying tomorrow. Yeah, it's now indeed. Yeah, we're Wednesday 19th, so tomorrow I will be in Vegas. I would say around this time. I'm almost landing.
Nice, and get there nice and early. Well, what's the plan? What have you done sort of over the summer? You know, we look back at Martin Jakobsen, for instance, spent the entire summer doing sims with all his friends, worked at. I mean, he had a singular focus about the final table because that's what fit for his plan. Maybe not everybody has that. What sort of your plan has been?
Well, I ran 2 tournaments actually just after making a November 9.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah. I mean, I have a job as well, so.
Sure.
So I ran 2 tournaments, one in Denmark, in Copenhagen, and one in Belgium, in Blankenberg. But in the meantime, and the last tournament was already from early September, so after that, my full focus was on the preparation for the main event. Did play some online, didn't play a lot of live poker actually, but trying to learn a bit online. And I had a group of friends around me who helped me out and try to prepare me as possible, looking if I made mistakes in some of the ways I was been playing and trying to correct them. And I've adapted a little bit, but in general, I didn't do that much on my game. Basically, I just played a little bit, tried to think a bit about possible situations that occur at the final table and how I should be playing them and discussing it a little bit with friends. But apart from that, I have not been working extremely hard or something.
Well, you got 10 days. I imagine you'll spend some time on it when you get to Vegas. How many of your friends are coming? Have you got a full crew coming over?
I have some friends and family flying in. I have a bunch of people that will be there to support me. So it will be great to have them there.
Nice. Are you a celebrity in Belgium now? I mean, this is a pretty big deal, right? For the Belgian poker scene, are you getting mainstream media or anything like that?
There's definitely some media attention around it. Some local media as well. So even people like from Belgium, especially from the poker community, they're all very, very supportive towards me, and I'm hoping that for the first time ever, a Belgian player will become the world champion, of course.
Indeed. All right, Kenny. Well, good luck. Thanks so much for joining us today. Appreciate it a lot. Have a good flight over, and hope you run deep.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Kenny.
Well, that was a fun interview, Ross. We ran out of time a little bit. We had a couple more things to get to. You found some odds offered on the final table. Where was that from? Was that Caesars?
Yeah, no, actually, they had them on Pinnacle.
It was Pinnacle. Okay, yeah. So the juice is going to be lower in Pinnacle than it is typically in Caesars, so they'll probably find better odds on the offshore site there. Was he 6-1 or something?
Yeah, about 6.3 to 1.
6.3 to 1. He's in fourth place. I think he's got about 86 big blinds, so tons and tons of play. He's got a really good spot too. I don't know if you saw the seat draw, the table draw.
I haven't
yet.
He's got
all the big stacks are to his right. And I think the second biggest stack is right across from him. He's got shorter stacks to his left, so he can ask for a better spot for sure.
Interesting here. I'm looking at Wojciech Rzyska is 9.16 to 1, although Griffin Benger with less chips than him is 8.04 to 1.
Griffin, yeah.
So
yeah,
I guess the odds makers are valuing the experience, the tournament experience.
Does seem that way.
And then behind him, Wong is 29.3 to 1. So big jump there.
He's only got like 15 or 16 big blinds or something.
Yeah.
I think.
And then it ends with Fernando at 50 to 1.
Yeah.
Might be worth it.
Oh, it's Fernando. That's right. He's the short. Sorry, Wong has more.
Might be worth it to sprinkle on Fernando for the big comeback win.
Hey, he doubles up once. You never know, right?
You're essentially gambling on another gambling event,
which we've been known to do in the past. All right, thanks so much to Kenny for joining us for the interview today. Roscoe, thanks for setting up the equipment and recording it all and getting it out there to the fine folks. Thanks to you for listening. We're going to do a show later in the week. Terrence is hopefully feeling better tomorrow or the next day. Got a bunch of stuff to talk about. There's a whole bunch of issues that have come up in the poker world this week. That'll be fun to throw around in case you missed it segment. So
you know how Terrence got food poisoning?
No.
Some of the best things that I've ever put in my mouth.
You got a bad carrot or something, and yeah.
Ugh.
All right. Thanks to you for listening out there. We will talk to you soon.